In the spring and fall 2019 semesters, some Stephen F. Austin State University Public History graduate students and Dr. Paul Sandel partnered with the Houston County Historical Commission to document the experiences of African Americans within Houston County, Texas. In the spring 2019 semester, the History 581 oral history students learned about the best practices and principles of oral history. We then put that knowledge to use by conducting further interviews with members of the African American community in Houston County. In the fall 2019 semester, the History 570 collections management students turned the oral histories into an exhibition for Houston County. Miss Emily Smith and I will be explaining the process by which these histories were acquired and recorded, our experiences in working with the local historical commission, how the oral histories were transformed into an exhibition, and the technology and methodology behind our data analysis. Houston County is located in a region of East Texas better known as the Piney Woods, approximately 152 miles from Dallas, Texas. The county seat is in Crockett, Texas, which houses the Houston County Historical Commission. Many of the interviews took place there. It is a primarily rural area with small communities scattered through it. While some of the Houston County's history had been written down, there is little to nothing recorded of the African Americans living in the community. The first day of class, we started learning about how to conduct an oral history interview. We read sources like the Baylor University Institute for Oral History's Introduction to Oral History, the Oral History Association's Principles and Best Practices, and Doing Oral History by Donald A. Ritchie. We were well prepared and read by the time we started the project. The first thing we had to do was research Houston County and find out what had been documented. The class divided up and we each took on different topics such as agriculture, education, and church. Afterwards, we discovered that not much was documented about the lives of African Americans in Houston County. The next thing we had to do was decide what kind of questions to ask. What was our time frame? What topics from our research do we discuss? How do we approach difficult subjects? Who would we interview? Luckily for us, the Houston County Historical Commission already had a list of names, telephone numbers, and topics that each person was familiar with. The people on the list that the Houston County Historical Commission provided all grew up in Houston County during segregation, so we knew that that had to be our time frame. We wanted to document each individual's experience with segregation and racism in Houston County. Each person in class chose who they wanted to interview. Their options were based on what each student researched. For example, Jacob Lee researched agriculture in Houston County. On our list, there was a man named Donald Ards, who according to the list knew about agriculture. Therefore, Jacob picked Donald. We initiated contact with everyone we interviewed. Some set up their interviews at the Houston County Historical Commission, the library, or the interviewee's home. We did encounter some issues with contact. The people we reached out to were elderly, and some could not hear on the phone. Others simply did not answer, and some did not understand what we were trying to accomplish. We worked through each conflict and ended up documenting the experiences of 6 African Americans in Houston County. Our interviewees told us about their lives growing up in Houston County during the days of segregation and immediately after the implementation of integration. After the interviews, we began the transcribing process. This included not only the initial typing of what was said during the interviews, but also a peer review and editing process. The transcripts are now in the final stages of being uploaded to the East Texas Research Center's website through Stephen F. Austin State University. The interviews themselves are being uploaded to the East Texas Research Center's SoundCloud page. This leads us into the next stage of this process. using the interviews to create an exhibition for Houston County, Texas.
The first day in collection management, we were told that our big project of the semester was to take the oral history from the previous semester and create an 8-panel exhibition using QR codes. Now, some students in collections management were not in the oral history class and did not know anything about the interviews that were conducted. So they were at a disadvantage because they did not understand how to create QR codes and how to take audio and put them into a physical exhibition. So in preparation for the exhibition, we read Exhibit Labels and an Interpretive Approach by Beverly Sorrell, Things Great and Small, Collections Management Policies by John E. Simmons, and Processing the Past, Contesting Authority in History and the Archives, edited by Francis X. Bluen and William G. Rosenberg. Once again, we were prepared to tackle our semester project. Our first task was to meet with the Houston County Historical Commission to talk with them about what they wanted to see. Our first meeting did not go as planned, and Dr. Sandel could not make it, but Dr. Beisel stepped in for him. When talking with the Houston County Historical Commission, they all had different ideas, which left the class confused. There was one gentleman that wanted to shift the focus to an overall history of Houston County instead of the African American history of Houston County. And then the other members had no idea what our intentions were in creating the exhibit. We left the first meeting flustered and questioning how to go about this exhibition. After explaining our frustrations and confusion with Dr. Sandel, he explained that the exhibition was to be centered around the oral histories. It was our job to take the oral history interviews and create a physical exhibit for the public to see. After meeting with the Houston County Historical Commission, the class came together to lay out our plan for the exhibition on paper. Once we had the plan laid out, we divided and conquered. We listened to all of the oral history interviews, visited the Houston County Historical Commission a few more times to go through their pictures and documents. We took a trip to Sam Houston State University to view a thesis, and we got in touch with the Crockett Library to see what documents they might have. Once we had all of the pieces, we had to assemble the exhibition. We all wrote sections, and then once we were finished, we came together multiple times as a class and edited each section before we finalized the text. Once the text was finalized, we had to pick interview clips. And this was hard because all of the interviews were well over 30 minutes. And as a class, we decided that our clips should be no longer than 2 minutes. And then we ran into another problem because we could not use every interview because some of the interviewees talked too softly that it was hard to hear what they were saying. In the end, we had to choose the best interviews with the best sound quality to make sure anyone who was viewing our exhibition and scanned the QR code would be able to hear the clip. Our first two panels in the exhibition were introductory panels. They introduced what our exhibition was, memories of home, oral history, and the African American past of Houston County. It included a map and explained our goal. And our goal in this exhibit is to make use of these oral histories to both share some of the history learned and to highlight the value of collecting oral histories, hopefully inspiring more people to participate. Then we briefly explain what oral history is and how we used it for this project and why we used it for this project. Next, we explained who we are and how the exhibit is a result of a collaborative effort between the Houston County Historical Commission and graduate students enrolled in the Public History program at Stephen F. Austin State University. Then we had a brief historical context of Houston County in the 20th century. And lastly, we concluded our introduction panels with the QR codes. We explained what they are and how to use them.
Now,
Our next three panels we titled The Heart and Soul of Houston County, and they covered agriculture, education, and church. The first panel in this section was all about agriculture and was titled They Grow the Crops, Agriculture and Race in Houston County. Here, we gave a brief history of what agriculture in Houston County looked like and what it continues to look like today. And we discussed cotton because at one point it was the leading crop in Houston County. The next panel we titled Our Space to Discover, Grow, and Achieve. Here we discussed anything and everything about education, from the segregation of schools to the desegregation of schools, the hardships that black schools face, such as receiving the used and worn textbooks from the all-white schools, and the passion for learning that the students had. We ended this panel by talking about Crockett's very own Mary Allen, which began as a seminary in 1886, and in 1924 it became a junior college, and stayed open until 1972. Mary Allen saw many students while its doors were open, including several future Houston County educators. Our third panel we called Learning to Live for the Lord, Church Life in Houston County. Here we discuss the different black churches in Houston County, such as Pleasant Grove Baptist Church, Bethel Baptist Church, and Miles Chapel CME Church. We discussed the importance that church was to people. Not only for their soul, it was their social life. Church was their everything. They joined choir or band. They held weekly, sometimes daily Bible studies. The youth joined the Baptist Young People's Union. They knew the Bible word for word. Church was their life. And so we made sure to make an importance to show how important church was to the people of Houston County. Our next section we called Crockett's Thriving Black Business and Entertainment District. Here we introduced and told the story of the Lewis family and the Gay Paris. We talked about Camp Street, or 3rd Street, but don't let anyone in Houston County hear you call it 3rd Street because they all know it as Camp Street. And Camp Street anchored the African American businesses and entertainment. It was their district. Then we went beyond Camp Street and talked about black-owned businesses past and present in Houston County. And finally, we concluded this panel by discussing the nightlife, the different musicians, the jazz, the soul, the pop, anything and everything nightlife in Houston County. Our next panel we titled Heritage and Celebration, and we discussed how the people of Houston County come together for different celebrations. One that is extremely popular is the Juneteenth holiday. In Crockett, there is a parade, and young girls can enter a pageant in hopes of being crowned the next Miss Juneteenth. Another popular celebration is the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Program that was started in 1978 by Roberta Mason. The program has had celebrity speakers such as former Congressman Jim Turner and former Secretary of State Myra McDaniel. We ended this panel by mentioning two extraordinary men from Houston County. The first was Howard Adolphus Wooten, who was born on April 20th, 1920 in Lovelady, Texas. In 1940, he entered the U.S. Army, where he rose through the ranks, becoming a staff sergeant in the 46th Field Artillery Brigade by January 1942. And when he was 24, he applied to the Army Flight School at Tuskegee, Alabama. He went on and was one of a select group of Tuskegee pilots who would train to fly North American B-25 Mitchell bombers. The second was Mitris Deitman, who was born near Crockett in Houston County in 1935 and is sometimes referred to as the Jackie Robinson of rodeo. He became the first African American to compete at the National Finals Rodeo, and in 1997 he was elected into the Rodeo Hall of Fame. finally, our last panel, our conclusion panel, we titled Coming Home. And we titled that because in many of our interviews, we asked why these people stayed in Houston County. And most of them replied, "This is home." From birth to death, church to school, agriculture to community, Houston County's African American population has contributed greatly to its history. And we wanted people to feel that in our exhibit. And when they got to the conclusion to coming home, they would see our word cloud, which was computer generated thing. We typed in the words that were repeated over and over and over again in the interviews, so people could see the words that meant the most to the people of Houston County, such as American, Crockett, community, farm, history, story, music, and others. For our last panel, we really wanted to feel like the people of Houston County came home. Lastly, when people saw our exhibition, we wanted them to smile at the memories they had, like Roberta Mason winning Miss Ralph J. Bunch, or going to catch a movie on Sunday after church, or playing basketball at the local park. While the research and preparation aspects were complete, we were not able to send off the exhibit to be made into panels due to a need to find more photographs of Camp Street. And when we went on the hunt of photographs of Camp Street, we encountered the current COVID-19 pandemic. So as time and circumstances allow, the exhibit will be produced in the form of movable panels for the Houston County Historical Commission to use. We would like to give special thanks to the Houston County Historical Commission, Dr. Paul Sandel, Dr. Perky Beisel, and students Alicia Bowling, William Carter, Julia Sid, Ethan Fatherly, Jacob Lee, Brianna Reilly, Amanda Saylor, Emily Smith, Mary Tucker, Chelsea Vinglar, Indy Zinaf.